At a certain point, many people experience something strange they didn't see coming. Things that once delighted them, activities that once filled them with enthusiasm and pleasure, suddenly seem to lose their savor. The music doesn't move them anymore. The food doesn't taste as it used to. The company of friends feels hollow. Even the pursuits they once considered their greatest passions, reading, walking in nature, creating things, all of it becomes somehow flat, colorless, without the spark that once made life feel worth living. And naturally, when this happens, people become frightened. They think something has gone terribly wrong. They believe they've become depressed, that they're ill, that there's some chemical imbalance in their brain that needs correcting, or they think they've simply become cynical, jaded, that life has worn them down and they've lost their capacity for joy. And they ask themselves, with genuine desperation, what's happened to me? Why can't I feel anything anymore? But what if I told you that this loss of joy, this apparent flatness of experience, is not necessarily a problem at all? What if this state that seems like death is actually a kind of birth? What if the disappearance of joy as you knew it is simply making room for something else, something you haven't yet recognized, because you're still looking for the old feelings, the old excitements, the old ways of being moved? Let me explain what I mean. You see, most of what we call joy or pleasure in ordinary life is really a kind of relief. It's the satisfaction of a want, the filling of a lack, the scratching of an itch. You're hungry, and then you eat, and there's pleasure in that. But notice the pleasure depends on the hunger. Without the hunger, the eating is just mechanical. You're lonely, and then someone pays attention to you, and there's joy in that. But the joy depends on the loneliness. Without the sense of lack, the attention doesn't move you. This is what the Buddha was pointing at when he said that life is suffering, or more accurately, that life is unsatisfactory. Not that everything is miserable, but that this constant cycle of wanting and getting, of lacking and filling, of itching and scratching, is inherently unstable. It's based on a sense of incompleteness, of something missing, of not being quite enough as you are. And so we spend our lives chasing these little moments of relief, these brief satisfactions. When a want is filled, we call this happiness, we call this joy. But it's really just the temporary cessation of discomfort. It's like someone hitting you on the head with a hammer and then stopping, and you feel relieved, and you call that relief pleasure. But the question nobody asks is, why were you being hit with a hammer in the first place? Now, what happens to some people, and this is what's happening to you if you're experiencing this loss of joy, is that they begin to see through this game. They begin to recognize that all these pleasures they've been chasing are really just escapes from discomfort. Once you see this, once you really understand it, the old joys don't work anymore. The scratching doesn't satisfy the itch because you've realized that you're creating the itch in order to enjoy the scratching. It's like a drug addict who takes a drug to feel good, but the drug itself creates the need for more of the drug. The relief the addict gets from taking the drug is really just the temporary cessation of the withdrawal symptoms caused by the drug itself. Once you see this pattern, the whole thing collapses. The pleasure loses its appeal because you've seen through it. This is what's happened to you. You've seen through the game of seeking pleasure and avoiding pain. You've recognized, perhaps not intellectually, but in your bones, that all these joys you were pursuing were really just elaborate ways of running away from yourself, from the present moment, from what simply is. And so now you're left in this strange state. The old pleasures don't work. The old excitements don't excite. You've lost your capacity to be distracted, to be taken out of yourself by experiences and sensations. And this feels like death. It feels like something essential has been taken from you. Like you've become a ghost, going through the motions of life but not really living it. But here's what you must understand. This state is not an end. It's a transition. It's the space between the old way of experiencing life and a new way that you haven't discovered yet. You're in the gap, and the gap is terrifying because there's nothing to hold on to. The old structures have collapsed, but the new hasn't yet emerged. Let me give you an analogy. Imagine you've been living your whole life in a room lit by candles. The candlelight creates all these interesting shadows on the walls, dancing shapes that fascinate you. You spend your time watching the shadows, being entertained by them, finding meaning in their patterns. This is like the ordinary joys of life. They're real enough in their way, but they're really just flickering shadows created by the limited light source. Now, what happens if someone opens a door and bright daylight streams in? At first, the light is so bright it's almost painful. You can't see anything clearly. Everything is washed out. And all those fascinating shadows that kept you entertained, they've disappeared, vanished in the bright light. And you might think, this is terrible, I've lost all the interesting patterns. Everything's become bland and featureless. But you're not seeing clearly yet. Your eyes haven't adjusted to the daylight. Once they do, you'll realize that you haven't lost anything. You've gained everything. You're seeing reality directly now, not just its shadows. And this direct seeing is so much richer, so much more real than the shadow play you were watching before. But it's a different kind of richness. It doesn't have the same quality as the shadows. It's not entertainment. It's something else entirely. This is what's happening when nothing brings you joy anymore. The old shadow play has stopped working, but you haven't yet learned to see in the daylight. You're in that transitional period where the old is gone, but the new isn't yet clear. And this period can last quite a while. It's not something you can rush. Your eyes must adjust at their own pace. Now, the usual response to this state is to try desperately to get the old joys back. People throw themselves into new hobbies, new relationships, new experiences, hoping to rekindle that spark. Or they turn to stronger stimulations, louder music, more intense sensations, more dramatic experiences, like someone whose taste buds have become dulled, trying hotter and hotter spices to feel something, anything. But this doesn't work. In fact, it makes things worse. Because what's really needed is not more stimulation, but less. What's needed is to stop running, stop seeking, stop trying to fill the emptiness with experiences and sensations. What's needed is to simply be with what is, without trying to make it into something else. And here's the extraordinary thing that happens when you do this. When you stop trying to manufacture joy, you discover that there's something present that was always there, but that you never noticed because you were too busy chasing after pleasures. It's not exactly joy in the old sense. It's more like an okayness, a fundamental sense that everything is all right exactly as it is. Not that everything is perfect or pleasurable, but that it's complete. It's enough. It doesn't need anything added to it. The old joys were based on contrast. Good times versus bad times. Pleasure versus pain. Excitement versus boredom. But this new state, this okayness, doesn't depend on contrast. It's there all the time, whether things are going well or poorly, whether you're comfortable or uncomfortable, whether you're experiencing pleasure or pain. It's like discovering that you've been living in a house your whole life, rushing from room to room looking for something, and then suddenly realizing that what you were looking for was the house itself. It was there all along. You were standing in it. You are it. But you couldn't see it because you were too busy searching. Now, I must warn you about something. When I describe this state as an okayness or a fundamental sense that everything is all right, you might think this sounds rather dull. You might think, is that all there is? Just being okay with things? That doesn't sound very exciting. And you're right, it's not exciting in the way the old pleasure